Hi guys, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Have you ever heard of the perennial philosophy? It's a philosophy and a book that was popularized in recent years by Aldous Huxley, and this very book, if you go back to the source and the root of all religions and spiritual paths, you'll find the same essence, the same core kernel in all of them, and that is the perennial philosophy. So in this episode, I'm going to talk a bit about how it came about, what it means for us today. But before I do that, I just want to say a few words about different perspectives that people hold. And there's two different types of perspective. There's a fixed perspective where you're not budging. That's what I think, and that's what I'm staying with. And there's the open perspective where you're open to interpretation and to have an argument and a discussion about the way things are. So the best way I can make this point is by this image, and again, this is just a symbol. Essentially, what we're looking at is a symbol, and one individual has one perspective and it looks like a 9. The other person has the opposite perspective and it looks like a 6. So these guys are both right in a way, but if you take a step back and have like this sort of meta perspective that we have by looking at the whole image, we can see that they're both right, neither of them's right, and there's a higher truth to their fixed individual perspectives. And this can be seen most widely in all the world's religions. If you ascribe to a certain religion, you have a fixed perspective. There's no wiggle room. You can't really move anywhere. Whereas, like I shared in my other video some time ago, religion or spirituality, this is essentially the point I was trying to make again, but hopefully I'll make it more clearer today. By being a spiritual person, you have a much more open perspective. If you ascribe and are like a traditional orthodox religious person, then by that fact alone, you have a very fixed perspective. So that's just a little few words on perspective. Maybe question yourself, ask yourself, are you an open person or a closed person in regards to your perspective on all these ideas and these things that we find and have in our lives? Just a few words about where the perennial philosophy would have came from, its source. If you follow any of the world's religions and traditions back to their source, back to their roots, back to this very seed that they grew out of, the perennial philosophy would say that this seed that they all began with is the same source, the same seed. And just by the fact that they're different traditions, different cultures, different locations around the globe, it would have grown into a different thing, a different final plant, if you like. There's different plants in Spain and Australia and England and America. And so it's the same with this seed. It was grown and nurtured and watered in all the different lands across the earth, and it grew into something completely different everywhere. Hinduism here, Taoism there, Christianity over here, and Buddhism up there, and Native American beliefs over here. So, but it's the same core seed at the essence of it. And so people that would try and spread and talk about the message that has grown out of the seed across time, we would call them prophets, saints, sages, enlightened ones, all these terms for these men and women who are talking about these, the whole plant in a way, because there's a whole wealth of ideas and writings and doctrines, and that's why I just love my books, I love my scriptures, because I saw that quite early on when I first read all the religious texts, all the source ones, the main ones that everyone would have heard of. I found it fascinating at all the similarities, because I've got a very open perspective, whereas another person, they only ever read their one book. They've got a very closed perspective. They only read their one book. They don't look at the other books. But by having a very open and broad perspective, I think it's helped me to be even more open and compassionate and loving in my life, And I just think it's benefited me a great deal, which is why I wanted to share this with you, so that maybe the Wikipedia article is very helpful on perennial philosophy, and there's a lot of other sources online if you want to go deeper still into it. And so I just want to share a quote from the end of the introduction of the Perennial Philosophy by Aldous Huxley, which I think, talking about it, sharing my ideas, what I've learnt about it, this last passage, I suppose, to be honest, it describes me very well as someone who's interested in investigating. And so I'll read the passage, say a few words. If one is not oneself a sage or saint, which I'm definitely not, the best thing one can do in the field of metaphysics and spirituality is to study the works of those who were, and who, because they had modified their merely human mode of being, were capable of a more than merely human kind and amount of knowledge. And this is where I am. I have an open perspective. I'll read a Christian book, I'll read a Sufi Islam book, I'll read a philosophy book, I'll read some popular fiction, some classic literature, because I'm open. I want to read from the great men and women of history and learn from them to develop myself, develop my ideas and outlooks on life. And I'm very happy at what I've gathered so far. And I know that I've only just begun, and there's many more connections to make, many more videos to do about that. And it's just very exciting once you get into reading and start making these connections and finding the source of all these ideas and having a nice open perspective. So that's what I've got to say about today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and the bell so that you get notified in the future. It's good to see you. Take care now. Bye.